In episode 2, it didn't take long for the police to realize that they had once again been duped by Hassan. Yusef, who just so happened to be near the location that Hassan fell, notices a crowd forming and heads over there, but Hassan, he's not there. Because Hassan is in the back of an ambulance that has both Ben and Philippe pretending to be police officers. When they arrive at the hospital, they switch into doctor scrubs. They take Hassan to the morgue, and they tell the head mortician that they'll handle the body, they just need him to fill out the paperwork. While the mortician believes that that is Hassan Diop and he is dead, one person who does not is Yusef. Because this is a calling card of Lupin. Faking your death, he does it all the time. He, along with Sophia and a few other police officers, head to the morgue to guarantee that Hassan Diop is there and he is in fact dead. The person they talk to is Philippe, and he does a really good job of trying to get them to go away. But something about the situation has Yusef feeling not quite right. So he decides to go double check. He grabs a stethoscope, puts it to Hassan's chest, and whatever he hears is satisfactory enough for Yusef to believe that Hassan Diop is actually dead. As soon as word gets out that Hassan has died, the media goes nuts. The journalist who had been working the Hassan Diop story gets usurped by one of her colleagues, and they even have a picture from the morgue of the body. They're also reporting that the funeral is Thursday. As for the pearl, that thing's still missing. Still, Yusef, he can't let it go. He feels like this thing was planned, and he wants to get to the bottom of it. He calls up the journalist who had been working the Diop story, the one who pretty much had everything right so far, and he tells her that he thinks Hassan faked his own death. He's willing to trade information with her if she helps him out. Whatever information she does give him is not enough to satisfy Yusef. Because during the funeral, a couple days later, he ends up staging a pretty big scene, interrupting it and demanding they open the casket to guarantee that Hassan is inside. Because the police, there's nothing really they can do about it, and when they open up the casket, there's Hassan Diop looking as dead as ever. But Yusef isn't the only one who doesn't think Hassan is dead. Raul also does not believe Hassan is dead. It seems like if you read the Lupin series, you would think that too. While Claire is completely broken up about Hassan's death, Raul is still holding out hope. Even after he watches his father be put in the ground, he still thinks there's a chance. And there's a pretty good reason for that. It's because Hassan isn't dead. This was all part of the plan. This was, in fact, the risky part. This whole faking the death thing was orchestrated right down to where he fell. He figured if he fell in a crowded spot, there would be so many witnesses, nobody could argue the case. It was then up to Ben and Philippe to rush in and be the, quote, first ones on the scene. If you're wondering how he survived the fall, that was just an airbag from Ben. When they got in the morgue, they made his body super, super cold. They doctored a stethoscope, and to everybody, Hassan Diop was dead. The final spot was emailing the journalist and just waiting for the photographer to show up. They knew that once the media got a hold of Hassan Diop being dead, the public would just accept it as fact. This would kill two birds with one stone. He would end up getting the police off his back, but he would also get the police off Claire and Raul's back as well. As for how he got out of the coffin, he simply dug a tunnel a couple days before. Once he was put in the ground, he popped open the coffin, crawled through the hole, and ended up in the sewer, where he changed clothes into that of a gardener in the cemetery. So once he actually surfaced, nobody blinked. Nobody paid attention to him, because he was just a simple gardener. What Hassan was unaware of was somebody interesting attended his funeral. His mother. He thought his mother had died. In fact, he hadn't talked to her for 25 years. They had a little bit of a rocky relationship. When Hassan's father died, he figured that she would come back for him, but she never did. And one of the reasons for that was she was locked up. Now she's free, and she decided to go pay her respects to her son. Or, at the very least, see if he was actually dead. As she's leaving the funeral, though, she gets stopped by a woman on the street because she clearly is lost. She's trying to find her way around, and the woman seems friendly enough. She starts talking to her, but it's all a ruse. The woman knows that this is Hassan Diop's mom, and she's able to convince her to share a taxi, which isn't actually a taxi, but instead, a getaway car for a kidnapping. The kidnappers want one thing, the pearl. They put a covert message in the newspaper that if Hassan were in fact alive, he would see, and they just wait for the call. And of course, Hassan is actually alive. He sees the message, and he calls the number, and he's shocked to hear his mother's voice on the other end. His mom wants to meet him that night at a church. This is something that Hassan was not expecting, so he heads over to Ben to let him know what's going on. Ben had spent the majority of the day setting up the sale of the pearl. They're going to sell it to one of their normal buyers for $20 million. But with this going on, that sale might be in jeopardy. Ben doesn't actually believe that Hassan's mom is alive, and Hassan doesn't even know if he believes that his mom's alive. But his bigger concern is whether she's alive or not, somebody knows that he's alive out there. So he needs to find out who this person is, if it's his mother or if it's somebody else. And if it's somebody else, what do they want? That night, he heads to the meeting location, which is in a church, and as he's waiting for his mother or whomever to show up, his cell phone rings, and it's his mom. She tells him to put the pearl in the donation box and leave. Keep the cell phone. He asks her where exactly she is, but she just reiterates that he needs to drop the pearl off. If he doesn't, they're going to kill her. She also adds in that the people who kidnapped her say that Hassan needs to work for them now, and then she hangs up. Even though Hassan hasn't seen his mother in 25 years, he can't risk somebody killing her. So he reluctantly walks over to the donation box, opens it up, places the pearl inside, and walks out, just like his mother told him to. Now it's a matter of waiting for instructions from these kidnappers and also making sure that his mother remains alive. For the second time in a handful of years, Hassan Diop had that pearl and had to give it up not long after. But his mom, these kidnappers, Ben, they're not the only ones who have figured out that Hassan Diop is alive. So is Raul. Raul had this hunch this entire time that all of it was a ruse. He had told his mother about this, but Claire was at the acceptance stage of grief. It was hard enough for her when she got the call and found out Hassan had died. It was difficult when she attended the funeral of Hassan with Raul. But she thinks that her husband just filled their son with these grandiose ideas of a gentleman burglar who was able to escape death. She doesn't have the heart to tell him that his dad is indeed dead. They all saw the body in the casket. Raul, though, doesn't believe it. Much like Yusef, he wants to look into the matter further. He doesn't believe his dad is dead, and he's looking for proof that his dad at least could have escaped death. He decided to go to the local library, and the first thing he does is peruse some Lupin books. The second thing he does is look at city blueprints for the cemetery. Doesn't take him too long to figure out that it's a real possibility his dad escaped. Once Raul figures it out, he screams in the library, which is frowned upon, but Raul could not care less. Because now Raul is convinced that his dad did, in fact, escape. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.